Welcome to Truck Chat, an interview series from Work Truck. I'm Lauren Fletcher, Executive Editor of Fleet, Trucking, and Transportation at Bobit, and I'm here to chat about how dealers can prepare for the growth in work truck electrification. Today's episode is sponsored by Isuzu Commercial Truck of America, and chatting with me is KC Heidler, President and CEO of Tom's Truck Center. Tom's Truck Center has served the Southern California region of Santa Ana since 1949. The full-service dealership offers medium-duty trucks from Isuzu, Hino, and Ford, used trucks, and commercial electric vehicles. And here's a fun fact. Tom's Truck Center is the only Isuzu dealer to have won the Ichiban Award, which stands for number one in Japanese, every year since 1996. We're here today with KC to talk about trends in electrification and how his dealership prepared to sell electric trucks, from service department prep to timelines, grant options, and much more. Welcome, KC.
Yeah, thanks, Lauren. Great to be on with you.
I'm excited. Let's dive right on in. It sounds like dealers, including Tom's Truck Center, are ready for the incoming wave of new electric trucks. As someone interacting with fleets every day, how are commercial customers feeling about the zero-emission vehicles available currently?
Yeah, great question, and I think maybe I'll start with a statement that the ZEV technology, whether it's EV or fuel cell, is amazing, and at some point in time, it's going to be great for the customer, and it'll lower their expenses, and it'll be more convenient, be less maintenance for them, and obviously, most importantly, it'll reduce their total cost of ownership. But right now, the customers there, I think the hype of the industry versus where the customers are, it's two different levels. And what's really bringing that, it separates the why the customers aren't into the product yet or into the technology is just because of the cost of the product. And in time, that's going to change, right? And the marketplace will change, and it will become, top of mind for customers. But right now, there's a pretty big separation. There's, I would say, maybe your large fleets. If you look at all of the commercial vehicles, operating on the roads in the nation, it's probably 30% of them are large fleets and 70% of them are owned by small fleets with 10 vehicles or less. And that 10 vehicle or less customer just hasn't seen it, where the large fleets are starting to, I would call it, an experiment and bringing some of these products on and stuff. So to answer your question, yeah, I don't think they're as excited as we are, but that will all change in time for sure.
And, it brings to mind, televisions. Just a few decades ago, if you look at inflation, the cost of a television, decades ago would have been in the thousands of dollars for something that's only a few $100s today, based on the changes in technology and how that's kind of come down. And I can kind of see that also happening with these electric vehicles.
I think that's a great analogy, and that's kind of what this timeline will be like. And I think the timeline will speed up or slow down with economies and politics and then just overall, advancing of the technology.
And looking at that timeline, what's it looking like for the growth of more zero emission vehicles in fleets as we're looking to the future?
Yeah, great question, and I would say it just depends on where you are, in what state you're in. I kind of look at it as a radar, right? There's the rings of a radar that kind of shows the distance of, distance. Well, the rings of the radar of time, if you're in California, is probably, now to 2 to 3 years, where, hey, you really need to be looking at what you're going to do to support this product, support your customer. But if you're in a non-CARB state that isn't as regulated as California, the rings of time is probably 10 years out, before you're really starting to sell and focus on EV product. So just like I said, I know the EPA is kind of pushing more towards CARB regulations, et cetera, but it's still pretty far out for most states.
That makes sense. And as we all should know by now, Isuzu recently announced its entry into the medium duty electric truck market, which is adding to the available options in this segment. So there's more to purchasing an electric truck, though, than simply the truck itself. It also requires supporting infrastructure. How has the infrastructure and related technology changed and advanced in recent years?
Yeah, well, first of all, it's great to see Zuzu make that move into the EV space, because they do such a great job in their marketplace now, and obviously, like I said, this this technology will advance and they'll be there. And I think Isuzu's positioned themselves well, time wise and product wise, and they've built a good team around that. And the other legacy OEMs, I'll call them, are doing the same. I haven't heard of any existing OEM that's not going to build an EV or a fuel cell type product. So I think Isuzu and others are positioned well. Like the infrastructure, we use the analogy about TVs. I kind of look, people always say, oh, the infrastructure is not there to support those EVs. And yeah, sure, if we converted every single commercial truck, in the United States to EV tomorrow, no, that the infrastructure wouldn't handle it. But the infrastructure is changing. I don't know if you remember, you look very young compared to me with my gray hair, but we used to have TV antennas, right? When I watched TV as a kid, and then there was this thing called cable TV, right? And that was cool, and it was like but man, it was, when would you get cable TV? Because they had to run these cables through the street, dig up the street, then run it from the street to your house, and then into your house, and eventually to your TV. And then, but cable TV went pretty quick, and I do see the infrastructure doing the same. And I think for we've dealt with one of our local power company here in Southern California, and it's night and day difference working with them. The sign behind me, a few years back, it was very difficult to work with them. But it's a 180. They have more staff. They're prepared to get a dealer or whoever through the infrastructure change to allow a dealer or whoever it might be to be able to charge these vehicles. So
you mentioned collaboration and with the providers and the utility providers, and that's definitely something that we're seeing a lot more on a lot of the sides. And a lot of the utility providers have fleets themselves, and so I think that's helping them with some of these transitions as well.
Yeah. And I think, another point there, which is interesting, it's not, one solution will fix everything and be the right solution for the ultimate customer. We were talking to a customer this week, and, it's a refrigeration customer that distributes food to local hotels, et cetera. And they park their vehicles at a food distributor plant, which has a massive refrigeration system with massive amounts of power and places to park vehicles. One of the things that we're doing, it's a partnership with Nikola and ChargePoint, is what they call e-skids, and it's basically a portable charger. So say a charger sitting on a pallet. It's more than that, but you can move this e-skid around to close to where the transformer might be in this large industrial building. Basically a plug and play solution for that building. So there's a ton of buildings, and there's also a trailer that we're stocking that does the same thing. It's just a little bit more mobile than the e-skid. So there's a lot of buildings out there now, industrial buildings, that have enough power to do this mega charging, so to speak, that's needed for the larger commercial vehicles. So I think there's going to be a lot of different things. If a dealership decides to become a charging solution, then I think that's a business model they pursue, and how when they sell a EV vehicle, hey, here's your charging package. And one of the things we've said, hey, we'll bring in a bunch of Isuzu EVs, and we'll sell them on this program where they'll use the EV, and for the day they bring it back to us. The driver Ubers back to wherever they're going, goes off the clock, we charge the vehicle, and then our staff that's working through the night delivers the vehicle back to their location, so it's ready to go for their driver the next morning. So, I could go on and on about, I think, the different types of charging solution and the infrastructure that's needed. And like I said, there's solutions now, and as we know with our analogies of cable TV, and I love the one of internet speed, right? It's like, hey, the internet when we first started was really slow. It was dial-up modems and all that good stuff, and then eventually went to DSL. And who had ever thought that we'd be watching a movie, streaming a movie on our inexpensive 4K TV? I would have never thought that. And so same thing will happen with this infrastructure and the solutions for the customer. So. Yeah.
No, that's great. And I mean, it sounds you clearly have a lot of experience when it comes to the infrastructure. What are some of the steps for setting up chargers and the timelines that go with that part of the process?
Yeah, so it definitely takes time, right? So we started probably a year ago with putting a dozen chargers at each of our locations. Um, we took advantage of some local programs in California to help us with the cost of the chargers, the actual infrastructure costs from the power company. Um, and there's a lot of just design. How are these you don't want to bottleneck your service department's drives, and you don't want to so there's a lot of flow to think about, and how long the vehicle will sit. So, but the agency was actually really good in helping us with that flow, and we had a consultant helping us too. And then the process of getting it through design into, hey, here's the written plans, and here's the plans that we're sending to the city. Has gone pretty quick, and we'll have these chargers installed, this late fall. So it takes time, like I said, but it's not like, hey, this is going to take 5 years. Now, you could be in an area, of course, if you're in a state that's very rural, and you don't have the power grid. Sure, that's a different story. But most dealers, and people that are supporting EV products are going to be in somewhat of a metropolis area that has power. So, but our process was about a year here, and like I said, we should see completion soon.
So, we mentioned earlier that there's definitely some cost that's associated with the vehicles themselves. There's time that takes that's involved in the process. You have experience with the HVIP California ZEV vouchers and working through grants. What can you share regarding grants and other resources that can help fleets pay for the infrastructure and equipment?
Yeah, I definitely can. I mean, there's, just a fun fact that we really, I think we've sold one ZEV product without a voucher. So that just kind of shows you the price differentiation versus, hey, is this really going to be a positive ROI for the customer? But to answer your question, the grants, especially in California, work, and it's a tedious process. I think we've done more grants or more HVIP vouchers in California than any other dealer. And basically, we have a staff that runs through the process to make sure that we're collecting all the data and pictures and numbers and VINs and VIN verifications, and then you go on the line for a lot of money. But once you get through that process, it's very lucrative for the customer, and they can get themselves in a ZEV program. There is and that's, like I said, I'm surrounded with the California programs and know them well. But there is a website that's extremely resourceful, and it's done by the Department of Energy, and it's called, bear with me here, Alternative Fuel Data Center. So Alternative Fuel Data Center website, and it's afdc.energy.gov. So afdc.energy.gov, and what that site, if it'll take you right to the page you need to be on. You can pick your state, and you select your state, and it opens up your state, gives you some really cool facts about how many EVs have been registered and fuel consumptions. But the best thing about it is that there's a link that takes you to the incentives and grant programs that your state offers. And then from there, and even I looked at Tennessee the other day. I have a dealer friend in Tennessee, and I was surprised. Like, Tennessee had 23 incentive programs
Wow.
that could be realized by the customer and dealers, et cetera. So from charging infrastructure to so to speak, a voucher program or rebate program. So that website is very valuable to anybody operating in any state. And I would advise, to start to get familiar with these programs, that they do change, and see what might work for you and what might work for your customer. So, but yeah, the programs are helping. I think that the focus from, state agencies to help, stimulate that marketplace is super important. And obviously there's funds there to help that. So
I love it. We'll make sure we drop that link in our description below for this video so you guys will all have access to that. You know, maintenance is something that we really need to make sure we discuss. You mentioned earlier that there is a little bit of a reduced maintenance. And with Tom's Truck Center not being a stranger to selling these EVs, having sold more hybrid and electric products than any other California dealer, maintenance needs are often reduced, but they do still need maintenance. Can you share what you did to prepare your service department for EV trucks?
Yeah, I mean, there's two super important things here. One, I'll start with the opportunity, right? So, talking to fellow dealers, yes, we're going to have less fixed operations. We're going to have less parts and service revenue because there's less moving pieces, right? But what that does is, we've kind of shared our marketplace with, the large full maintenance leasing companies. And I think it's always been a friendly relationship, but they've always done a very great job of providing a full maintenance lease of an ICE engine. Well, now with the ZEV product, full maintenance goes away, so to speak. I mean, there's very little maintenance, and it really puts all of us on a level playing field. And I think so dealers looking to say, hey, how is this, if it's an Isuzu dealer, how's this ZEV going to change my world? Well, yeah, I mean, it'll change your world, but it'll open up other opportunities for you. So one thing with that, the maintenance of it is, hey, look to say, hey, how can I retain this customer, for a complete 360 circle of the life of the vehicle, and effectively be able to offer maintenance and potentially charging throughout its life. But really, the most important piece in the maintenance part is safety, right? So I mean, you're talking a lot of electricity in these vehicles. So there's repair protocols, there's tools, equipment, and training that the technicians and anybody that's going to be around these vehicles need to go through. And I know Isuzu is prepping to have training programs for their dealers and their technicians that are Isuzu dealers. So that's number one. You've got to be safe with these vehicles, and then two, it's just it's going to change how like a lot of dealers kind of run a triage as a vehicle comes in, and what's wrong with this vehicle. Right now when an EV comes in, it's kind of like, hey, send it to the clean room because it's more of a programming problem than it is a mechanical problem. And the program problems are challenging. I mean, we see them now with all the semiconductors that are on trucks today. So it's versus having, like I said, all these mechanical pieces connect. It's more of like, how does this program of this part of the truck talk to this other program, which I think will open up our marketplace for attracting technicians that want to be more into the computer programming world versus maybe just heavy lifting of axles and tires and rims, etc. So but it is, I mean, we just had an issue 2 weeks ago and it took us about 2 weeks to figure out the EV vehicle that we had sold and used a local upfitter. They did a great job, and we were just spinning trying to figure out why isn't this EV vehicle working? Well, it was just a switch on the lift gate that was causing the ECM, on the truck itself not to work. And so we're going to see a lot of that. And that's, like I said, that's where we'll have to change. Hey, how do we go about, these repairs, prepping our people to be more, like I said, programmers of the product. So
It's interesting. It's definitely an age where the computer is becoming just as much of a tool in the toolbox as a wrench is.
right. Wait till AI starts to control the truck.
No, closing things out, is there anything else that you think a dealer should really start to think about and do to be ready for EVs?
Yeah, I would say once again, I mean, NTA was a great show with all the EV stuff. ACT will be the same, and there's tons of exciting hype and lots going on. And the startup EV manufacturers are there and they're pushing hard. Um, and hopefully, a lot of those aren't going to survive, and they'll probably merge or maybe get absorbed by a legacy OEM. But I think that the most important thing is to not overreact and partner with your OEM. Us being partnered with Isuzu's is very, yeah, I have the confidence that, hey, listen, they're going in this the right way. They're going to support us on the product. They're going to train us on the product. They're going to go talk to our customers about the product. And because, that's, like I said, it's what the customer can afford, what the pricing is, and ultimately what is the best solution for them at whatever point in time we are with this evolution that's coming. And the best, like I said, partnering with your OEM is gonna help you through this change, and I haven't, like I said, I haven't heard any OEM not announce that they're not going to do an EV or a fuel cell product. So they're going to be there in partners with us. And like I said, I think everybody will be in great shape if they just keep that in mind. So
That's wonderful. And I know I, for one, am really excited about Isuzu's new product. I think they came at just the right time. I really appreciate your time, Casey. You shared some really actionable insight into the changing needs for dealerships to really support the growth in truck electrification.
yeah, no, Lauren, it's been fun. I love this stuff, and like I said, anytime you want to chat again about it, more than happy to. And yeah, thanks for Isuzu. Like I said, I'm happy that they're in this space and moving forward with it.
Well, I appreciate you. Thanks to everyone who tuned in to today's episode of Truck Chat, sponsored by Isuzu Commercial Truck of America. For more info on Isuzu, its truck options, Tom's Truck Center, or to see more episodes of Truck Chat, check out the links below. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a single episode. Till next time.